Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast, regular season edition. I am Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and now of Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. As always, we've got our producer, Justin Stein, with us. And Aaron, we finally made it. We got some football to talk about.
Yes, we have actual games that were played. And I've got to tell you, it felt like a regular week to me. Like, despite the lack of fans in the stands and the fact that the piped-in sound was a little weird, it didn't necessarily get excited at the right times, and they piped it in at different levels, not in the stadium, but the broadcast, like different broadcasts piped in the fake sound at different levels. But it felt like a regular week of football, like it was just watching football like usual, and it felt real good.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think we were looking for like what would be different this first week and how things would look normal or not normal. And a couple of things we were looking out for were road offenses, not having to deal with the crowd noise. And the thing that was, I think the surprise ramification there was many, many more offsides penalties. I didn't check the numbers on that, but just anecdotally, it felt like there were a lot of people jumping and falling for the snap counts that they could hear.
Yeah, the penalty thing was interesting in the first week because it seems almost like they put out the word to call fewer penalties. So it did feel like there were more offsides. I don't have a number on it, but I do have seen numbers on holding. There were way fewer holding calls than there usually are.
Right. And then the other thing, and I was expecting a drop off in play. I was expecting that there would be ramifications of not seeing training camp and not having all the practice time together. And for the most part, that was really not visible on the TV screen. These games were good, and it was kind of similar to what we saw with the NBA bubble when they came back. And I don't know if it's fresh legs. I don't know if it's just I don't know exactly what's going into it, but it was clean, crisp football. And maybe you could make the argument that the defenses aren't as up to speed yet as they could be. So if the offenses are maybe, you have a step ahead on offense because it's less reactionary, maybe that makes a little sense. But that's not, on the eye test, it just looked like good football to me.
Yeah, I said something on Twitter about it shows they didn't miss the preseason, but I kind of phrased that wrong. It showed they didn't miss the training camps is what. It's the training camps. There was less training camp this year. It's not preseason that gets players ready as much because mostly that's backups playing, but it's, more time with the pads on in practice that they had less of that this year. So, but it was crisp other than field goal kicking, which I have a feeling will turn out to be a random week. That I have a feeling it'll turn out to be that it's not because the winds are different without fans in the stands.
Is that the speculation? I haven't heard that one.
I've seen Jay Feely, I think, wrote something about that it was going to be harder to kick because the players weren't used to it.
Oh, interesting.
But I have a feeling it's going to turn out just to be a random week.
Well, going back to basketball, we did see what felt like good shooters seemed like they got hotter. Like we saw those Jamal Murray games and Donovan Mitchell and all that shooting well. And people were saying it's because there's no fans kind of throwing off their line of vision. Here, maybe it's the lack of fans that is creating some sort of other effect. I don't know.
I have a feeling we're going to find out that's not.
Yeah, I doubt it. I'm with you there. There is one quality of play thing that our friend Dan Pizzuta wrote about. And he wrote that based on SIS data, it went from 11.4% passes attempted at least 20 yards down the field in 2019 week 1 to just 9.0% this past week. That was the one thing that I was noticing as the games were going on that actually was a difference. And I was happy to see that Dan astutely picked up on that. But the way that I wanted to look into that I dug into was what type of pass plays are being called specifically in terms of the drop type of the quarterback. How many 3-step drops, 5-step, 7-step drops? And when I dug into the number of that, we definitely saw, whereas last year you had more 5-step drops than what we call 0 or 1-step drops. Just basically you snap the ball and you get it out of there. Last year, there were more 5 steps. There were 62 more 5 steps than 0 and 1 steps. This year, that flipped. There were more 0 and 1 steps than 5 steps this year. So that was one ramification that we saw. The other one with the 7-step drops. You don't typically see a whole ton of 7-step drops in a usual week. They're about 5% of pass attempts last year on week 1, 61 total 7-step drops called around the league. This year, that drops to 52, which is down at 4%. So it's just 9 fewer, but as a percentage of what's going on, it's not an insignificant change. And again, you see there were more basic screen passes called than 7-step drops this year. And again, that was flipped on its head from last year. So we did see some more, we'll say, kind of conservative pass plays being called. Not the run-pass split I'm talking about here, but amongst the pass plays being called, there was some more conservatism there in terms of shorter drop types being called relative to where we were at a year ago.
Interesting. I don't think I noticed it league-wide, but now that you think about it, I noticed it with specific quarterbacks. Obviously, like the Patriots weren't throwing long and the Saints weren't throwing long. And now that I think about it, that was definitely a thing around the league.
Right. And in terms of success, Aaron Rodgers had a whole lot of success. Carson Wentz had very, very little. So there was no pattern to be found there, I don't think. But in terms of around the league, that was one overall pattern that I think it makes sense. The coaches know that their offensive lines haven't had as much time together. Those are high-risk plays from an offensive line and a pass protection perspective. So you want to do less things that are going to be difficult from that standpoint. Again, fantastic week 1. I'm just so happy to be talking about football.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to see the new faces in new places. It was weird to see the new faces in new places. Some of them had success, some of them didn't.
Yeah, and let's get right into it. Aaron, I'm dying to hear your reactions to Brady and Cam Newton. I'll throw out a quick stat off the top. Each of them were responsible for 2 total points earned in week 1, but they got there in very different ways, I think, except in one sense that both of them got hit a lot more than maybe we would have expected.
Yeah, I don't think the Patriots can continue to run Cam Newton 15 times a game. That would be 240 for the year. And even Lamar Jackson last year only had 176. But Josh McDaniels said in a press conference, some of the 15 carries by Newton were that there were not run pass options, but read options.
Yeah, zone reads, yeah.
That it just was the right thing for the quarterback to keep, and there'll be some other week where it will be the right thing for the quarterback to hand off, so Newton won't have as many runs. It's not that they called specifically Newton runs. I think there's an element where, because this offense wasn't on film, that Miami may not have been quite as ready for it, and that effect obviously will be less of one over time because teams will have this on film now and know what the Patriots are doing. But what was wild to me is they only threw 2 passes, had 2 pass attempts on 3rd down, one of which was a sack. So they only threw 1 pass. Even on 3rd and 6 type plays, they were running the ball.
So my old boss, Mike Lombardi, he talks about offenses playing left-handed. And what he means by that is, can you play when you have to get into the drop-back game? And that, to me, is going to be the big question, I think, is what you're getting at there. They didn't need to in this game. But when it comes down to it, are they going to be able to do the straight drop-back stuff?
But that win was bigger than it looked in just the final score. They were number 2 in DVOA for the week. And if you think about the N'Keal Harry, if N'Keal Harry doesn't fumble that ball through the end zone, that final score is probably 28-11, not 21-11, and it looks a little bit different.
Right, and we had them, just like we had them at the beginning of last year, as the most dominant pass defense in week 1.
Which surprises me because I expected regression, and we'll see what happens after they've played some better teams like Seattle this week.
Hey, the Fitzmagic giveth and the Fitzmagic taketh away.
Speaking of old men throwing interceptions, what did you feel about Tom Brady's week 1?
I thought Tom Brady got hit a lot. I think that we were curious and maybe a little bit skeptical about how he would fit in the Bruce Arians offense. And this, I thought, was an example of what could go wrong pretty quickly there. I thought that just as we talked about around the league, the quick drops and stuff like that, for the first time in Brady's career, he's out of that quick drop system and he's into something that's more of a drop back game. And you saw him get hit, you saw him get pressured, and you saw an unhappy Tom Brady face.
Yeah, Donovan Smith had a bad game at left tackle.
Yeah, well, one of my worst misses, I think, as a scout was Donovan Smith. Just as an anecdote there, I loved him coming out of Penn State. I thought he was going to be phenomenal, and terms of career earnings, he's done well. But
like, it wasn't just Cam Jordan. He was getting beat up by Trey Hendrickson a lot.
And that'll happen with him. So you've got to think that the Bucs are going to do something to get more into Brady's comfort zone, right? I don't think it's 1 week. I don't overreaction Monday, of course, overreaction week 1. But when you look at it, I have real questions now about whether he's going to be able to really function in that system. Not the arm strength question, but the hanging in the pocket, that question. It's just not what he likes to do. And when he gets hit, I think he gets uncomfortable and he becomes not Tom Brady anymore. And I think we saw him become not Tom Brady during this game. So I think they're going to need to make some real adjustments.
I think there's going to be a lot of Gronk blocking. There was a good amount of Gronk blocking in this game, right? People felt, Gronk didn't have a big receiving game because he was blocking a lot.
The early returns now, it'll be interesting, as we go forward. And I think the theme of the week, always this week, is how easy it is to overreact to things. So maybe it's a 1 game sample size, and the New Orleans Saints are pretty good.
The Carolina Panthers are probably not. So that's who they play this week. I mean, defensively, right, the Panthers, we had them projected as the worst defense in the league. So if you're going to get it back this week, although against that run defense, there'll be a lot of temptation to just hand the ball off to Ronald Jones a lot because the Panthers are so bad against the run. They were so bad last year, and then Josh Jacobs picked them apart in week 1.
SISBets.com is back for 2020, and if you didn't make use of it last year, you missed out on easy money. SISBets.com is an advanced prop betting information tool powered by Sports Info Solutions. With it, you can leverage the power of our proven projections models to find value against the odds. You're never more than a few clicks away from knowing whether your favorite wide receiver is likely to score a touchdown this week, or whether a quarterback that you have your eye on is likely to go over or under his completions prop. Just choose the bet type, the player, and the money line to see the SIS Bets recommendation. SISBets.com is available for just $9.99 per month, so it easily pays for itself, and that price covers both football and baseball. That means you can also take advantage of our most popular bet type, home run projections, which our users rode to a very solid 12% ROI in 2019. Sign up at SISBets.com. Let's move forward to most important games of the week. Aaron, what do you have for the number 1 most important game of this week?
Okay, I'm going to throw a switch at you here because I'm going to flip what we have listed on our rundown. But the most important game of the week is actually Jacksonville and Tennessee, where the Jaguars make the playoffs 58% of the time if they win, 30% if they lose. And the Titans make it 66% of the time if they win, 40% if they lose. Jaguars win in week 1. How about those Jaguars?
Yeah, I don't know anybody that saw that coming. I know a lot of people got messed up in their survivor pools, certainly with that one. It's interesting. A week ago, we thought that the Jaguars were tanking and that the Titans might be a contender. That was kind of the common knowledge. I don't know if you'd really consider them a Super Bowl contender, but certainly a playoff contender, division contender. And now all of a sudden, it's totally plausible that the Jaguars could beat the Titans this week. And that narrative would be just totally flipped on its head in terms of, are the Jaguars actually a team to be reckoned with in that division, coming out 2-0 like that? And then the Titans, what do you do Ryan Tannehill-wise? Because it was 0 points earned for Ryan Tannehill in week 1. And you know how I've felt about this. I think this is going to be a regression to be reckoned with, that they're going to have a tough contract decision if they're not careful.
Well, first of all, Henry didn't have a good game, right? Although Denver contained him last year too, so maybe it's just something about that defense. And then Tannehill, I was like, where's the cool play action downfield stuff? Come on, man. Like, I didn't see the design cool plays that we saw make life easy for Tannehill last year. Like, I just felt like they weren't there against Denver.
How about this for a cool stat, Derrick Henry-wise? We had him 56th in expected points added on runs in this game. As you mentioned, he got bottled up. Even so, we had him number 1 in points earned from a running back perspective, which tells you that based on the charting data, they were getting beaten up front. And yeah, Derrick Henry was still doing his thing, breaking some tackles, but it was just barely break even on what he was getting back to by doing that. So yeah, Derrick Henry's still really good, even though the Titans didn't move the ball on the ground or in the air in that game.
Yeah, on the other side of the ball, you were talking about not going downfield. And Minshew in week 1 had the high completion rate, but he didn't go downfield. He had low 5.9 average depth of target. But I will note, 4 of his 5 passes, he only threw 5 passes that were over 10 yards downfield. But 4 out of the 5 were either complete or got a defensive pass interference flag. Tennessee last year was 30th against what we call other wide receivers, which I think is a good sign for Laviska Shenault, who had a nice first game. And they were 29th against number 1 receivers, and Adoree Jackson is on IR, which I think is a nice sign for DJ Chark.
The funny thing with Gardner Minshew, you mentioned the low depth of target, and that was absolutely true. But when you complete 95% of your targets, you still end up with 8.7 yards per attempt, which puts you at 5th in the league over week 1. So
a strong game despite the sacks. He took 4 sacks. The Jags were surprisingly last in adjusted sack rate in week 1 because they had, he only took 4 sacks, but it was on fewer pass attempts compared to like the Eagles where Carson Wentz got destroyed. But even with the sacks, like Minshew had a really good game.
And I'm not going to go so far as to call this a scouting mea culpa, but certainly the week 1 returns on CJ Henderson were excellent. He was second in the NFL in points saved for defensive backs. We credit him with 9 points saved in week 1. He had just 58 yards yielded on 11 targets, including 3 pass breakups and 1 interception. He was outstanding. We thought it was rich. We thought he was a good player, but I honestly, I thought he was more of a late first, second round type guy based on where we had him graded. The Jaguars took him in what I thought was a reach, but so far, to be fair, they went after him. They tried to target him. They went after him 11 times. So maybe the scouting reports on him were not inconsistent.
He was great. So now we'll see, does he stay on a side or does he cover specifically A.J. Brown? There was a lot of Corey Davis in the game compared to A.J. Brown, but the Titans said in the press conference afterwards that, that was sort of the coverage sort of dictated where Tannehill went with the ball. So.
Yeah, and our scout Jordan Edwards, who wrote up C.J. Henderson, he's mentioned to me before in talking about him. He's a guy that can play in man, he can play in zone, he can play off, he can play press, and he can be a guy that travels or he can be a guy that stays home. So a lot of scheme versatility with him.
All right, the second most important game of the week is, oh boy, here we go. We got to talk about the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. Lions make the playoffs 49% of the time with a win, 21% with a loss. Packers 62% with a win, 35% with a loss. Matt Patricia determined to make me look like an idiot with blowing another fourth quarter lead. Unbelievable.
Yeah, Bryce Rossler is Sports Info Solutions resident tortured Lions fan. And he noted a couple of accomplishments on the level of eating an entire wheel of cheese in his article that went up on Sharp Football Analysis this week. Listen to these amazing accomplishments by the Lions under Matt Patricia. 11 blown fourth quarter leads in 33 games with Patricia as a head coach. That's amazing to get that many opportunities. That includes losing 191 percentage points of win probability, which sounds okay. That's weird, out of context. I don't know what that means. That's over 2.5 times worse than the next worst team over that time frame. Talk about the difference between first and second place. And then finally, the specific one in this game, the rare occasion where we recommended that a team punts and they don't punt. Usually with analytics, we're always saying don't punt, go for it, or you need to be more aggressive. But when the analytics say to punt, you should probably punt. The situation was a 55-yard field goal attempt up 10 with 4 minutes and 8 seconds to go. He sacrificed 2.4% of win probability on the play by attempting the field goal. And the Sports Info Solutions win probability calculator said they should have actually punt the ball there. It's still a 2-score game, whether you make the field goal or not, and you can back the team up. So public service announcement, if you want to argue with analytics when they say to go for it, we can still have those arguments.
Yeah, people do not realize how hard long field goals are. They're not easy.
Yep. It's a 50-50 shot, and it was just the moves there. And then, okay, so let's go back. We're in overreaction week 1, but here we go again. The Lions we were looking at as the hot team that could be a surprise overachiever this year. And the Packers were the team that everybody thought their win total way outplayed what they were last year. And we were expecting. Which
admittedly put those two teams even. It did not put the Lions way ahead of the Packers to say those things, but yeah.
Right. You had them both at 8 projected wins, right? Again, 1 week later, we're going into week 2 now, and this game we'll leave there, and they'll both be 1-1, in which case we'll go back to believing what we believe. Okay, we're right on pace for that 8-8. Or if Aaron Rodgers plays well again and he can have another game like he had last week and the Lions continue patriciating, then all of a sudden I think the narrative about these teams is going to look really different. So I'm waiting for week 2 to have my overreaction.
Well, these two teams did play close last year twice. The Lions lost both games because of course, but they only lost by 1 point the first time with Stafford playing, and then 3 points the second time with the backup playing. So I have a feeling this one will end up close again. And I took a big spanking on Twitter this week for the fact that DVOA actually put Minnesota ahead of Green Bay for week 1. As I've often pointed, Minnesota had more yards per play than Green Bay. And as I've often pointed out, like all my research has suggested that stuff from quote unquote garbage time is predictive. So, the fact that the Vikings, the other thing is the Packers had their best plays of the game in garbage time. Like the Vikings were scoring all those touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and then the Packers were coming back and scoring touchdowns too. So like if you took out the fourth quarter, you would take out a lot of good stuff for the Packers, not just good stuff for the Vikings. So I don't know what to think about this. Green Bay was 6th against the pass last year, but 23rd against the run. So you wonder if it's going to be a big game for Adrian Peterson. The Lions, the Packers are obviously very heavily dependent on their number one receiver, Devontae Adams. The Lions are now no longer have Darius Slay. Jeff Okudah is hurt. So how are they going to cover Adams? I mean, I'd love to see the Lions make me look good, but I've got my reservations.
Yeah, we had some bizarre looking results on some of our things with the Vikings too. I think they had one of these games that's going to look different when you start to parse it analytically than when you do when you just observe the game. So I think we're in the same boat as you there in terms of having some weird results as far as that goes. I just want to take one more moment to just think about Aaron Rodgers. New season, same guy on top of the total points leaderboard. He's got 18 total points earned after week 1. Second place is Russell Wilson, just behind him with 17 total points earned. So keeping an early eye on the total points earned leaderboard. New season, same story there.
Yeah, I think an interesting question is if you believe, and you believe this, and Mike Sando believes this, that what's been keeping Rodgers back is his teammates, that he still is a tier 1 quarterback, despite what the analytics say about his basic numbers. Not the total points analytics, but anything else like EPA or DVOA or ESPN's QBR. Do you really believe that the Packers around him are that much better this year than they were in past years? Because I would say that if you don't believe that Aaron Rodgers is going to play a little worse in the future, you probably at least can believe that the Packers around him are going to play a little worse in the future because they have in the past.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see the Packers come out and play games like that every week of the season. What I will say is it's another year in the same LaFleur system. And I think the real benefit of having a guy like Rodgers in that offense, Sando made a great point about it, but he almost made it sound like you could waste Rodgers there. What I think is you want to do what Elway did late in his career, which is you can have the on-schedule stuff based on the offense working. And then when the on-schedule stuff doesn't work, then Rodgers takes over. Then you have the Elway to transcend what's going on kind of by the book. And what I think is going on, and John Shirley's done some really good research on the Packers, kind of looking into them and how they've changed. I think that you look at their receiving group and you look at their defensive backs. They've drafted a lot of young players high in the last few years. And if you're going to make an argument in favor of the Packers, it's that those players are going to develop. And as they round out into form into the system that they've been playing in for more than a year now, and then you attach that to all the great things that Rodgers brings and you get the synergies there. That's how I think it ends up. That's how I think the Packers end up contending this year. The other thing that I think you'll see is they're more suited personnel-wise to be in 21-12, which I didn't think they could do very easily last year.
The other thing I'm going to point out is we talked a lot about the Packers talking about being really run-focused, but they were really pass-focused in this game, even with a lead, right? They had a 10-point lead, got the ball back with 8 minutes left, and they went run, pass, run, pass, run. And one of those passes was a 40-yard deep pass to Devontae Adams. So they aired it out with a 10-point lead and 5 minutes left instead of just running out the clock.
You got to love it. I think that offense, a lot of the time, it's, hey, we're going to figure out the inflection point of their defense where either they're going to have to make a decision, stop the run, stop this sort of pass, stop the play action. And, when the defense gives you the deep ball and that's what you got, I was happy to see Rodgers take it. I feel like I'm fanning out a little bit too much on Aaron Rodgers.
All right, let's talk about our last game of the week. This one is less important for the playoffs, but we wanted to talk about it because we think it's really interesting, and that's Baltimore and Houston, the battle between Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson, it's more important for Super Bowl odds than the playoff odds because the Ravens are so heavily favored to go to the playoffs, whether they win or lose.
And I just see this as such great foils, Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson, because I would argue that two great young quarterbacks, some ways their skill sets are similar, but in some ways they're certainly different. Lamar Jackson, more of a designed runner. Deshaun Watson, more of somebody who will run to set up the pass, and somebody that does a little bit more in kind of the typical, prototypical drop back mode compared to Jackson a little bit. But then you see what's built around them, and I just think that's where everything departs. The Ravens have built an infrastructure that supports Lamar Jackson's skill set in a way that I think this is going to be a really hard battle for Houston. I think Houston, start off with Kansas City, then you go to Baltimore. Nobody envies that schedule, but hey, it'd be a little bit easier if you kept DeAndre Hopkins around. But I just think that when you look at these teams and the decisions that have been made to fill out the rosters around them, that's where the similarities end between these two guys. So I like Baltimore big in this game. And I think as you watch the game, my guess is you can see some of these things really play out.
Yeah, and also the coaching, the aggressiveness, for example, right? Harbaugh, obviously more aggressive, more analytical. But, other things about the coaching, like how they control their locker rooms, I just feel is better for Baltimore. Another thing that's bad for Houston in this game, I went and looked up. Houston was 31st in run defense DVOA against quarterbacks last year. So that's a bad thing when you're playing against Baltimore.
Yep. And in week one, Lamar Jackson really did it more with his arm. He's in third place in total points after week one, but he's the only quarterback in the NFL with a perfect independent quarterback rating.
Yeah, Cleveland tried to stop the run, and they succeeded. The running backs averaged less than 3 yards a carry. Lamar Jackson made them pay anyway.
And that goes back to that thing. You try to make a team like the Ravens with Lamar Jackson play left-handed, and Lamar Jackson looked pretty good left-handed in this game. Most of the air created through the value offensively and defensively. Their pass defense was responsible for 19 points saved, which was second only to the Patriots.
So another thing I'll say for this game, I thought about the tendencies of these teams. What did I want to go look up as far as stats from last year? We know that Baltimore loves to blitz. Watson last year, this is interesting, 7 yards per play against 4 pass rushers, dropped to 5.4 yards per play against 5. But he did average 8.0 yards against 6. But that's always a small sample size, the 6-man pass rushes. So overall last year, Watson was worse against the blitz than he was against 4-man rush, even though he's consistently one of the best QBs in the league against pressure. We know that performance with a clean pocket is much more consistent than performance under pressure, but Watson has been top 10 each of the last 3 years among quarterbacks under pressure.
Right. And always important for people to distinguish between being pressured and being blitzed.
Yep.
Those are two different things.
Sometimes you send 5 and the blitz gets picked up. Sometimes you send 4 and it doesn't.
It makes sense to me. If you send 6 against Deshaun Watson, I can see why he's going to beat that because you don't want to have nobody left to spy him or be over the top.
Plus he has DeAndre Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am just so happy that we've been able to break down week 1 and now look forward to week 2. So on that note, let's sign off. Thank you to all of the listeners. As always, thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe, rate, review, and we love it when you tell your friends. We saw lots of great reactions to our podcast with Mike Sando last week. So please keep the positive feedback coming. You can check out footballoutsiders.com for lots of great content. Follow Aaron at FB Outsiders. Aaron, anything else people should check out on FO this week?
Well, if you missed it last week, the return of Mike Tanier's walkthrough, writing weekly, is up on Football Outsiders now. And then Film Room with Derek Klassen breaking down Gardner Minshew. So more Gardner Minshew talk in case you didn't get enough on the podcast.
Fantastic. I'm so elated that Tanier's back writing on a weekly basis, and we'll have to have him on the show with us soon. You can also check out Sports Info Solutions on Twitter at sportsinfo_SIS. Check out the free SIS Data Hub by visiting sisdatahub.com. That's right, it is free. You can check out all of our advanced stats like total points and IQR. For my co-host, Aaron Schatz, and our producer, Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.